Thank you for joining me today. This is episode 2 of the Sufficient Backyard. Last episode, we discussed on how to collect watering resources in a natural disaster or a man-made disaster that might eliminate utilities, electricity, and water, and how to find water. We did that in the last episode. This episode, we're going to focus on gardening. Gardening, just about everybody practices it, but in this scenario, gardening is one of those things that you're going to have to really rely on and have a source of nutrition to come to every day. You're going to have to practice. Gardening skills are things that you have to practice, but just about anybody can do it. Now, we'll go over people that have a little land to put a garden on, and we'll go over people that have they may live in a suburb with a little bit of a backyard, and we'll go with people that maybe live in an apartment and see what we can do there. So first off, if you have land, the bigger the garden, the merrier. This garden is about 800 square feet, and it can fit a ton of vegetables. Since I have quite a few people here on the land, my father-in-law lives here, my family lives here. That's 10 people at least right there, and I have some close neighbors. That's a lot of food. So, big garden. Now, if you don't have room for a big garden, there's different ways you can do it. If you rent a house and you can't dig up the backyard, or maybe you can get permission from the landlord, you can actually do gardens that are maybe 4 feet wide and run it the length of your backyard. You want to have at least 4 inches of soil, preferred 6, and you want to basically build up the garden and put topsoil down, because one of the most important things about a garden is the soil. So if you don't have money to buy soil, what I recommend is, I'll show you in a second, buying a bag of soil and just sprinkling on top some kind of like Miracle-Gro type vegetable, so to get some nutrients in there, because you want a rich soil to plant your seeds in. And you might be able to, if you rent a house, you might be able to pull off doing a raised garden, because at the end of your lease, you can actually take a rake and just spread that topsoil over the top of the grass, and that's gonna actually be great for your the grass, because it's gonna grab that soil and it's gonna grow back stronger. So no problem there. You can just rake that dirt out, and the project will be over. But if you own land, I would encourage you to bake yourself a big old garden. And if you can't, and you have to put them in pots, I recommend these. These are cheap. They're not the best looking, honestly. They're kind of ugly, but it's a lot better than like if you buy a $10 pot from Home Depot. These things are about $4, and they're very deep, which is great for bigger plants, because you're gonna need some plants that have, if you put a squash plant in here, it's doable, not preferred, but you can do it. And a squash plant will put its roots down into there, and you can buy, let's say 10 of these, and you can have 10 squash plants, which is gonna be great. I'm gonna recommend certain plants based off of how much they produce. You can also use these. These are great for growing like your spinach and your kales. Have a ton of these. I got 100 of these for what, $10? Very cheap. And so you can put vegetables inside and put them on your windowsills and grow a ton of kale. That's a lot of nutrients right there. You can put into a soup, and you can have that for days. Just keep growing it and picking it. So today, it's important to know that you're gonna want to do your research based on where you're at in the country. So with Texas, your first freeze is usually around November 1st to November 15th, in that range. So that's gonna affect what you plant right now, because certain plants in here are not gonna make it past that. But there are a handful, most of them actually, majority are frost resistant. And so for this time of year, you're gonna have to do your research on what plants you can do, which basically is kale, lettuce, cabbage, snap peas, onions. So you're gonna wanna look for some frost resistant plants. Also, when it gets around the next year and it's going to the summer, you can plant other things. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take you on in to our garden. I'm gonna show you what I planted. So this first row right here, this big old plant, is a squash plant. And if you have to do buckets, if you can't put it in make a garden, you put in buckets, this is what you're gonna plant on the squashes. It needs a lot of room to go down deep. See how big this plant is? It's about 3.5 feet wide. And the good thing about squash is that every week you're gonna yield a handful of them. Just pick it right off there, and you're gonna have, I don't know, this is 1 week of squash. You have 1, 2, and a little baby one, so 3. Now, multiply that by how many squash plants you have, and that's how many squash you're gonna have a week. And the thing is, if you come in here, they keep producing. You see, these little baby ones, they're gonna keep coming back. You want plants that keep producing. So unlike if you think of an onion, you just pull it once and it's done. Think of plants that keep producing vegetables that you can pick from constantly, so you can go back and keep getting and yielding fruit, or yielding vegetables in this sense. Because when you plant like one-time vegetables like carrots, you pull it up, it's done. But when you plant like squash, you have a lot more picking time. So I actually planted these in March this year. I had 2 rows of, I had 12 altogether. Unfortunately, the Texas summer killed all but 2 of them. So at one point I was collecting 6 squash a day and zucchini a day in the nice spring season. But when the summer hits, basically it shuts down a lot of your plants, and very few things can grow in a very hot summer. But since I kept them watered and I kept them healthy, 2 survived, and they're still producing quite a bit of squash for me. So that's one thing I do is if I have too much, I cut it up and I freeze it. I'm gonna start practicing canning as well. So we'll go over to some more stuff. One thing you want to think of is if you have a garden this big, the chickens are trained to come out here because I give them food all the time. One thing you think of if you have a bigger garden is you have to strategize what you're planting, because you're going to run out of room, and you got to plant in, like, let's say you don't want to plant 10 squash at once because you're going to yield like 7 squash a day, which is too much for you to eat. So think about planting 2 squash every week. That way it kind of comes in increments and it produces in increments. So you're having like steady squash for months, but it's coming in slower increments instead of planting all at once and just getting bombarded by vegetables. So that's kind of way you think of gardening, is when to plant in increments of weeks. So what I did, I have going up here are my snap peas. Now I have 170 snap peas. It's a lot of maintenance because they have to climb. As you can see, my wonderful system that I have them climbing up. But I planted these in different weeks. So I can snap peas are vegetables that you can just pick off like the squash, and they'll keep growing. So every day I'll pick a handful and I'll put them in a jar, and then I'll come out and I'll gather the rest, right? So you have vegetables that are gonna keep on giving you resources every day. Not like I said, ones that will just be one-off. Now I have broccoli going right here. It hasn't sprouted yet. You can actually see a little bit of a sprout coming up from the broccoli just now. They're starting to get going. You know, it just takes a while for these things to pop up. Over here I have pumpkin. I did the pumpkin. You got to be aware of what you plant, because this is only 2 pumpkin plants and they just climb and they dominate the garden. So you got to be aware of what you're planting, because they'll take certain things will take over your garden. So I don't suggest melons or pumpkins unless you have a lot of room. Right here, if you look over here, I have cabbage and kale, and so they're growing in this section over here. The cabbage is about a month going, and the kale is about 2 weeks. Kale grows a lot faster. You'll find that some vegetables grow a lot faster than others. So the goal of a garden is you have to have a strategy if you have a plot of what you're going to plant and where, because as you can see, if you don't have a plan, you'll have your pumpkin already attached onto to a bean plant, you know. So you have to kind of move stuff around and make sure you have space for it. And you have to plant it in increments. Like I said, if you don't have a garden space, put these in buckets. They'll climb up in buckets just fine inside, and you can make a whole row of these buckets in your backyard, and you'll be just fine. And you'll actually a lot more easy to maintain, because you're not going to get a lot of weeds in the buckets and stuff like that. A lot easier to pick. And the garden this size, they have to come out daily and pick weeds to clean it up, or it just gets out of control. So in a scenario where you don't have resources to go down to the store, a garden is a must. You're going to have to grow some sort of nutrition. Otherwise, you're going to have to rely on gathering, which will be in the next episode, is gathering what is your local resources, what's growing in your backyard. But if you can plant like those squash right there, tons of vitamins, tons of nutrients. You just pick it off. You had a plant going, it's going to keep producing for you for months. That's a gold mine as far as keeping healthy and keeping yourself nourished and having energy. So I think I said all I know or should tell you about gardening. One thing I'll mention is I have a perimeter. If you live in a place by, where it's open to country, you're gonna have to basically have a perimeter, because you're gonna have rabbits coming in here. You're gonna have rabbits that are eating up your garden. You're gonna have whatever, raccoons coming in, nibbling on it. You're gonna have deer coming in. So you gotta put a perimeter around it. Or have a dog by chance, like out there. He gets a rabbit every once in a while, but I can't trust him. He's not the best security guard. He mostly focuses on rats and whatnot. It's disgusting. But you might be able to have some kind of protection around your garden is the best choice. That's all we have for today. I think the next episode will be on gathering and hunting, and we'll go from there. We'll go from there into farming, and then we'll go into energy resources that you might be able to take advantage of. So that's it for today.